Hi, my name's Tyler Orr. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm also the creator of a type of therapy called constructed awareness. Now, maybe you're a therapist who's interested in learning about CA, or maybe you're a client who works with a constructed awareness therapist and you're here just to learn more. Either way, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. The purpose of this video is to tell you a little bit about CA, to introduce the concepts, the principles, and to just talk a little bit about what's going on in the CA community. And by the way, when I say CA, if you haven't noticed that, that's just short for constructed awareness. So to talk about CA, the easiest way that I found to explain it is to just explain the three principles. So the first principle is, if you bring awareness to something, it changes it. Now, when we're talking about it through a therapeutic lens, we say that as a client brings awareness to their experience changes. We see examples of how awareness itself is transformative. A good example is that little kids behave differently when they're being watched versus when they're not. So that's an example of something external. You bring awareness to it externally, it changes. Now the same is true for us internally. If you bring awareness to your thoughts and your sensations and your behaviors, those thoughts, sensations, and behaviors change. I'm pretty convinced at this point that the only thing that makes a pattern, a habit repeat, is a lack of awareness of all the steps in that pattern. So with CA, we don't put any energy into changing the client's experience. We put our energy into deepening the client's awareness of their experience, and that allows that awareness itself to bring about the change that the client has been looking for. So it's more of an organic, natural approach that relies so much less on willpower. And that's the way of our society. That if you work hard, you'll get what you want. I sat down one time to try to make a list of all the ways that that's true, and I actually couldn't write anything down because how many times have people worked hard to accomplish something and it just didn't happen? So a lot of our more perennial types of therapy are built around that idea. That if you work hard, you use willpower, you can overcome these undesirable emotional states or these undesirable behaviors. But I know for me early on as a young therapist, as I practiced that way, I found that it just didn't work. I'd come up with a treatment plan, we'd come up with ways for the client to overcome whatever the problem is, and they come in the next session and they hadn't implemented the plan. Things were just as bad or worse, but now they're getting double whammied with thoughts of, what's wrong with me? I must be weak. Why can't I overcome this? So I learned pretty early on that didn't work, at least for me. So I began to explore what does work, and that's what led me to this first principle, that awareness itself is transformative. So the second principle, we're looking at, okay, what do we bring an awareness to? The second principle says that everything you've ever experienced in life is only made of three things. Those three things we call the building blocks of reality. So the building blocks are thoughts that come to mind, sensations that you feel in your body, and your external senses, basically your five senses. So I'll speak for myself. I've never experienced anything in life that wasn't one of those three things. It's pretty cool to think that we can boil the entire conscious human experience down to just those three building blocks. So that leads us to the third principle. The third principle is that most people are naturally more oriented to one of those three building blocks, meaning they rely more on that one part of their experience and less on the other two. Some people are mentally oriented. They rely on their mind to regulate their emotions and to connect with other people. They connect more on an intellectual level. They regulate emotions through reason and logic. Other people are more externally oriented, so they focus more outside of themselves. They regulate themselves by taking care of other people or by organizing their space. Other people are sensation oriented, so they rely more on their bodies. When they're upset, they cry, they emote, they may shake, they may move, and they tend to connect with people through their body, through more like touch and sharing space. So this is really useful in therapy because if you can determine how a client orients their awareness, meaning which part they rely on the most, Well, that helps tailor make resources, because if you know what's dominant and most used in the client's experience, then you can focus awareness on the parts of their experience that they rely on less. So, for example, if someone is primarily mentally oriented and they rely less on their external environment and the sensations that they feel in their body, it may not be that important to put a lot of emphasis on their mind, which is what we see with a lot of cognitive therapy. Instead, it might be better to focus resources more on their external awareness of their five senses and what they feel in their body. Now with CA, we've developed resources that are specific for each of those building blocks. So that client that I just mentioned that relies more on their mind and less on their environment and their body, there are particular resources that are taught in the CA Level 1 training that are focused toward those building blocks that are less developed. Another thing with constructed awareness is we view emotions a little bit differently than your traditional therapy. And this is rooted in a theory called the theory of constructed emotion. Basically, an emotion is constructed by those three parts. As the mind, the body, and the external stimuli come together, it creates what we would call an emotional experience. I would go so far, and this is where some people I'm sure think that I'm a little odd when I say this, but I'm not convinced that emotions are actually real, because they're not something that you can actually find in reality. Emotions are just concepts. They're words, they're umbrella terms that describe the collection of those three building blocks as they come together. And our minds do this a lot. Our mind will take something that's made of a bunch of parts and put one word to it, and it's easy to communicate that way. That's why our minds do it. A good example is a storm. There's lots of things you can experience tangibly with your senses. You can hear the thunder, you can see the lightning, you can feel the wind and the rain. But where is storm? If in the middle of a storm I asked you to put your finger on storm, what would you do? You'd realize pretty quickly that there is no storm. There is only the parts that make it up. We just happen to take all those things, lump them together, and use the conceptual word storm to describe all of those things. And the same is true for an emotion. Let's say that you're experiencing anxiety. Well, we can notice the thoughts that come to mind. We can notice the pictures and the words that you're thinking. We can notice the sensations. You can connect with the feelings that are happening in the body, like the temperature, pressure, those sorts of things. You can notice what's happening in the environment that's influencing that internal experience. But if I said, put your finger on anxiety, what would you do? You'd realize pretty quickly, well, there is nothing there that is actually anxiety. Anxiety is just a word that describes the collection of those things. So this is why we call it constructed awareness, because we're bringing awareness to the parts that construct the emotion. We put less energy on focusing on emotions. Instead, we focus on bringing awareness to the parts that create that. Another important part of constructed awareness is the typology of 6 orientation types. This isn't something that we can get into in depth with this video, but this is something that we go into in depth in the CA Level 1 training. There are 6 orientation types. Those are called achieving, thinking, adapting, giving, feeling, and trusting. This is useful in therapy because it helps you, the therapist, learn to make some pretty accurate predictions about how a person behaves, how they regulate themselves, how they connect with the world, based off of these patterns of behavior that we see with the CA typology. If you'd like to learn more about that, you're welcome to go to the main page of constructedawareness.com, and you'll see an image, a link that says, click here to take the Constructed Awareness quiz and learn your orientation type. This is a short assessment that helps to identify your orientation type, and it also gives you information about your orientation type. Also on the Constructed Awareness page, there's information about trainings. So maybe you're a therapist who's interested in attending an event. If so, just go to the training page and you can find all the information and hopefully sign up. So I want to tell you real quick before I let you go that there are 2 levels of training in constructed awareness. Level 1 focuses on resourcing trauma. Level 2 focuses on processing trauma. If you make it to level 2, you'll see there's a natural flow from the resources that are learned in level 1, will take those resources and put a structure around it that allows you to process traumatic memories. So really, that's it. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this. You're welcome to join the newsletter on constructedawareness.com. It's just a way to stay informed. But I hope to see you soon at a training event. Until then, take care.